roundtable for the day 5 of Gateway X. Slightly smaller panel than last night, so this should be easier. We've got Ralph Renzetti, the Mudfather from Ontario, Canada, and Dan Spalding rejoins us for as long as his internet hangs around, from just outside London, in the UK. And we may or may not have other guests join us during the roundtable that may or may not be late and may or may not have got the memo from me to say turn up. But that's fine. If people join us, they join us. So how we're going to do this is the same as we've done on all the previous roundtables. I'll put a question to the panel, to Ralph and Dan. We'll go through the pre-prepared questions. We've got 4 pre-prepared questions tonight, unless I think of another one on the fly. And then we'll go over to Facebook. I see 7 people have put photographs of their work on our Facebook post, so maybe it was a little bit more difficult to find today. But if you go to the NMRA Facebook group, pop some pictures in of your weathering work. I thought weathering might be popular, but maybe not. And we will get... at the end, we'll get your questions out of the chat. So post your questions that you want to know about. If there was a question that from Ralph's clinic earlier today or from Dan's clinic you didn't get the opportunity to ask it now, and we'll pick it up at the end. So to enable the smooth operation of this roundtable, fellas, we're going to go in the same order every time. So Ralph goes first and Dan goes second. Okay, and that way, Brad can actually cope with spinning the wheel of turning everybody. Okay.
Fair enough.
It was a lot easy. It was a lot more difficult last night. Randy, Eric, Dave, and Dan, and it sounded very wrong when we were saying it, but it was trying to say that really quick. Okay, so let's go. Question 1 that we have is weathering stock. Lots of posts been put on that weathering, lots of comments on forums and stuff that weathering stock will devalue it. Do you agree or disagree, Ralph?
What do you mean by stock?
Rolling stock.
Weathering my rail cars, motives?
Yeah, rolling stock.
Okay. I'm for it. And most of my stuff has been classified as extreme, but if you look at prototype photographs, it's not extreme.
Okay. And Dan?
I think, from a financial point of view, unless you've got some sort of collector's item, stuff that I see at train shows secondhand seems to, if it's weathered to a good standard or whatever, it fetches a premium, or the dealers charge a premium. And I think from a personal point of view, it gives value because you get, if you've done the weathering, you get a sense of achievement from it. So I think it's all good, basically.
Agreed.
Okay. So the second question, how should somebody go about repainting a model for the first time? You guys have both repainted many models, but if this was your first time over again with your years of experience, how should somebody go about it, Ralph?
I think it depends on what the model is. If you're really concerned about getting the old paint off, then there's so many different things you can use. My go-to right now is 90% alcohol. Soak it in the alcohol overnight, and most of the paint will come off. There's another product called Simple Green, which is a household detergent sort of thing, house cleaning product. That also works. You got to soak it overnight. The last thing I go to is Easy Off Oven Cleaner. Now, Easy Off Oven Cleaner, when I say that, I'm talking about the one that you spray on and wipe it off, not the one that you bake in the oven and then wipe it off. And it needs to be in either a plastic bag or a Tupperware container, some sort of container that you can seal and leave it for 24 hours. And an old toothbrush is amazing to get in all the crevices and so on. Once I've done that, I prime it. And my newest product for priming, and I got rid of all my other primers once I got this stuff, and I think I mentioned it in the clinic on Monday or on Sunday, is Stynylrez. It's made by Badger. Stynylrez, or for Canadian Z. This stuff is great. And once I've got that, I can go ahead and use whatever colors I want. I can use the lacquer paints by Scale Coat. I can use Badger colors, or I can mix my own. And a lot of times I do mix my own. And once it's painted, and I use it all through an airbrush, once that's done, it's ready for decals, whichever way you want to say it. And then fading, weathering, and away I go.
Yeah, I mean, I go with that. In terms of stripping models, I use a product you can get in the UK from a company called Phenom Precision called Super Strip, and that's very, very good. It will take off manufacturer's paint. Again, you soak it for about half an hour and brush it off, and that's very, very good. Going back to what Ralph was talking about with 90% isopropyl. Yeah, I've had problems with K2 HO shells that start melting. So that's the only caveat that I put on that is just probably be a little bit careful.
I've never had that issue.
Yeah,
never had that issue.
It's just that the ones I've had, the plastic generally that they use seems soft, and it tends to react with the maybe it's the IPA over in the Europe that's a funny recipe or something, but I'm always a bit dubious with that one.
Okay. There is one product that I've heard guys use, and I cringe when I hear them do it or say it. I used to do model cars, and I used to use proper car paint, spray cans. And to get the paint off, the guys would use brake fluid. Well, it is a great paint remover. Absolutely great. But don't ever squeeze that plastic again because it will shatter. It makes that plastic that brittle. So don't use brake fluid.
Yeah. On the primer that I use is AK's primer, which is it's very, very good. The only disadvantage with it that it's a lacquer. So if you don't like anything smelly, it's a bit of a no-no. But it's very, 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 very fine.
You're using the one in the spray can?
No, liquid.
Really?
Yeah.
We don't have that one here.
All right. Okay. Yeah, it's AK Interactive's micro filler, but that's really, really good. But it's like, yeah,
MIG ammo. It's a surface primer. It's not lacquer. It's acrylic.
Yeah, they do an acrylic, but they also do a black. Unfortunately, because I'm not in the cabin, I can't get it off the shelf. But it's
blame that one on your wife.
I blame my dodgy internet, but they do a white, a grey, and a black. But that's very good. Or the other one is Guns, Mr. Micro Surfacer, but that's a lot thicker, so you have to thin it with their self-leveling thinners. But that's very, very good as well. But it's smelly, so that's the only disadvantage.
Okay.
Love the smell of lacquer in the morning.
Smell of victory.
Ralph, we need you to record that as a soundbite that we can use. I just expected like a horse's head to appear in someone's bed after you said something like that. Right. Okay, so the next question then is weathering. There's so many different types of weathering, so many different techniques. We've covered quite a broad spectrum, including Ralph's favorite weathering, pan pastels, of course. We've covered everything on NMRAX pretty much in the last few months. But somebody except one. Well, there's always another one.
Nobody's done that one yet. They've shown it, the box, but nobody's done it.
Yeah, we've shown it, but we've not done it yet. Okay. But we have talked about it. So if somebody, somebody's never weathered before, or has tried it and it didn't go very well, so hasn't done it again. What would be the best way for somebody to get started in weathering? What should they do as a simple technique to just ease themselves into doing some weathering, Ralph?
First thing I tell them to do is go to these garage sales or flea markets or the local train shows and pick up all the old cars that are for sale for $2 and $3, something to practice on. The more and you can use acrylic paints if you want. I'm not fully opposed to that, although I don't like the technique most guys are using now. But you can use acrylic paints for washes and that sort of thing, and just practice. The worst thing that can happen is you go ahead and you do something and you're not happy with it and you don't want to go any further. But the more you practice, the better you get. The better you get, the more confidence you build. The more confidence you build, you're ready to tackle anything. My first major purchase was a Broadway Limited Mikado. And when I first started weathering, I thought there's no way I'm going to touch that. It cost me too much. I'm not going to destroy it. I've been doing weathering now for probably about 12, maybe 14 years. I have no problem doing that. I was showing you that brass model that I have for a customer, another one that you wouldn't want to do as a first weathering job. I don't have problems doing it anymore because I have the confidence in knowing that the techniques I use or have developed work for me and I can move on. So don't give up on the first one.
Okay, Dan?
Yeah, I can only echo that. It's getting old scrap bodies and go for it. I mean, start off with something simple like a wash, because in terms of bang per buck, in terms of technique, it's really simple to do. It's very forgiving, depending on what medium you do. So if you do an oil wash, for instance, that will take days to dry. So if you put too much on, you can go back, take it off. I mean, the other one is a product that I use from a company over here called Flory Models, and they make a wash that's clay based, so it's completely acrylic. You put it on and then you wipe it off with a wet cotton bud, just with water or a damp piece of kitchen towel. So that's very forgiving.
Well, that's really cool.
The only thing, when you get onto doing real models, the secret, I think, is to make sure you clear coat. So before you start, put a clear coat over your model, and then it gives you a base that if things do go a bit wrong, you've got a bit of protection to take off what you've done, and you've still got the original, should have the original surface underneath to work back from. And again, if you start doing layers, put a clear coat over the top so you can take it back each step if you've got a step that goes wrong, once you start getting more confident and you want to start layering stuff up. But it's practice. It is just practice, as Ralph said.
Okay, cool. Okay, so here's another one then. What's the best piece of advice someone has ever given you with respect to painting and weathering, Ralph?
Don't be afraid of it. One of the things that I've observed is you give a child a paintbrush and they have no inhibitions whatsoever. That paint is flying all over the place. Give an adult a paintbrush and tell them to do whatever, and they're very hesitant because they're afraid to screw it up. So the thing is just to get off your ass and do it. Pardon my French, but get off and do it.
You score number 4 there, Ralph. Thanks. 4th swear on NMRX. Dan?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of best bit of advice, for painting, is prep and taking care of the surface that you're laying down. If you put a rough coat of primer down, that just, however many coats you put on top of it, it's just going to keep going all the way through. So it's taking your time, prep. If something goes wrong to start with, then stop, rub it down, get a polishing cloth, polishing compounds, take that down, sort the problem out rather than trying to bodge it. Sorry, that's a Britishism. Rather than trying to cover your mistakes. And the other one is, which I covered on my presentation about, air pressures and paint mixes. Try and be flexible. So where manufacturers will come up with air pressures and paint mixes, where you've got that, where you're trying to get that balance between paint mix, air pressure, distance to model, atmospheric conditions, X, Y, Z. Take that stuff. Take the stuff as a guide, but be prepared to experiment and kind of go on the fly a little bit.
That brings something to mind. You mentioned in your presentation about air pressure.
Yeah.
25 psi for acrylic.
Well, roughly. That's it's a guide.
I shoot everything between 12 and 15 pounds.
Okay.
Everything. The only thing I up my pressure for is the Stynylres, because it's a very thick paint, and they say to spray it directly out of the bottle. Don't thin it.
Mm.
And this stuff, once you put it on, you'd think, oh my God. And then when it's dry and you come back, it's laid down perfect.
Mm.
So, like I say, everything I do is 12 to 15 pounds. The other thing I do, because if you have a small compressor that doesn't have a tank, that what do you call it? The moisture trap that's on the front of it. It doesn't do a thing. That doesn't do a thing for you.
Mm.
All it's doing is giving you a regulator. If you put the moisture trap at your brush, you won't have a problem anymore. So this goes on the bottom of your brush where your hose connects. So I have a quick connect on here, and then I screw this onto the brush, and I can disconnect my hose. Easy to work, just like the other one. It has a little, like a tire valve, a Schrader valve in here to let the moisture out if there is any. And I've actually had some. Painting on a rainy day is not a good thing to do. I don't know whether you've ever tried it.
No, I've always worked on, it's got to be relatively warm
and dry.
Yeah.
So what you're both telling me there is airbrushing in Orkney is a bad idea.
Yeah, probably actually.
Because I was thinking that on certain days in Orkney, all I need to do is throw the paint up, have the model at the other end of the driveway, and it'll just paint itself.
Get yourself a dehumidifier, mate. That's where you're going.
Because the wind will just take it at a lot more than 25 psi and spray it
pretty much
everywhere. All right, cool. So that was the pre-prepared questions. We're running a little bit early tonight, probably because I've not got an army of people answering these questions. But we can come back. Keep putting your questions in the chat. We're going to scoot over to Facebook and try and not kill my internet connection. And as I have said now a lot, you are looking at my... let me just do this. Make this full screen. You're looking at my personal Facebook page, and you're looking at the admin side of the Facebook group, which is why it may look different from your own. So I apologize if anything comes up. Okay, so this was our post for the day, Ralph, that you weren't able to find. It had a big image.
I had the scenery and a couple of others, but not that.
Oh, okay.
Intro.
Okay. So Dan has he's put a model on inspired by you, Ralph. So I think we'll go to you first with this. So he's done this with pastels and a wash to seal it. It looks like he's taken your advice on using an old car body. Sorry for the lag. It's quite a good photograph he's taken there. So what do you think, Ralph?
He needs to keep practicing. the drips down the side there, that's the one thing about modeling. If you try and do the whole car at the same time, you'll miss something. So just do one side at a time and get that the way you want it. I usually start on one side or the roof, and then a side, and then an end, and then flip it over and do the other side and an end. And the roof, it doesn't. I use sponges when I do my weathering instead of brushes. Sponges, and when I use the MIG ammo products and the AK interactive stains, that's when I use a brush, and it's a special brush that with the mineral spirits you draw it down. But don't give up.
Yeah,
Don't give
I
up.
think he's done a good job here on the ladder. It's a good chipping effect there.
Mhm.
I think it's good crack at oxidization on the roof, to be fair. So, but yeah, keep working on the rust streaks.
Yeah, streaks.
But their rust streaks are tough, especially trying to get them to go perfectly vertical. A lot of practice.
I have. It's not so much a practice. I used to be able to draw straight lines. I studied architecture. I was able to do drawings, straight lines, floor plans, and everything else. But nowadays, now that I've gotten older, I can't use my brush right down because it tends to want to tail off. I don't know whether it's my stomach that gets in the way or what it is. But so I now take a straight edge or another brush handle, and I will use that to guide me, to keep me straight going down the side of the car.
How'd you get that? How'd you get that brush square to the car?
Well, you have help. You got the ribs on the car. So if you follow a rib and just keep going like that, and I usually do it now so that I turn the car end for end, and I go across from top to bottom across.
Okay, so next poster was Robert, and I think he has heard Dan say oil washes. So he's built this up in layers. He's doing his intermodal car decks. Do you think, guys?
Yep, it's pretty good. Good start.
Now, the other thing you have to concentrate on when you do this kind of stuff, there's actually truck traffic that happens on top of these cars. So at some point, you're going to get lines of not necessarily tire marks, but you're going to have dirt form where the tires go across it more than in the middle or on these sides.
Well, I think that's probably picking your period because, as you say, early sort of like TTX stuff when it was circus loaded, you're probably going to get more of that. Later stuff when it's piggybacked or whatever, then
but these particular
probably
cars,
spotting.
These particular cars, they drive on and then they flip up the fifth wheel post.
No, not always. Don't they lift them on now as well?
Yeah, latter day, if you're going probably mid 80s upwards, is going to be piggybackers and gantry stuff. But
so you might have some spots. So you guys are saying where the wheels are, you may have some, even if they're dropped on.
It's a perfect example of getting a prototype picture for your period and going from that.
Yeah,
perfect example.
There you go.
So my intermodal stuff where I do kind of sort of like late 90s onwards, there'd be a lot more rusty as well, where they've been generally mistreated. But I say it's your period, so always check your prototype pictures.
I'm impressed we've managed to talk for 25 minutes about painting and weathering, and that is the first time we've mentioned a prototype picture.
I have to agree.
I'm impressed. Okay. Trash gondolas. Using the salt technique for peeling paint and oil washes.
Okay.
There was a good article in the British Region magazine, not this time, but last time, and it's not now, but they were available. They're a digital magazine, so it's available to get a digital subscription. And there was a really good article on doing salt technique.
And I'm assuming, and maybe it's wrong to assume, that this is HO and not S scale or bigger. Salt technique, and as I said in my presentation on Sunday, I showed the salt technique, and HO is probably the last scale where you'd be able to get some sort of effect that might look good from salt, because you can't get the granules small enough. And when you use the salt technique, you have to pay attention to where you put them, or where like that there looks like he had the car on its side and he just sprinkled it on and got it in a few spots instead of being particular about where you put it. It usually happens at the bottom of panels or close to the edges or where it's been scraped or bumped. But overall, the job looks like he's got the idea.
Yeah, I think that's a good job. I think you've done a good job there, Robert.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm not, personal preference, I'm not a huge fan of salt weathering. If I was doing something like that, I'd be either using packing sponge,
Exactly.
doing
That's
it
just what I
that,
was going to say.
or chipping fluid. So you put the chipping fluid. You can actually, if you look at the AK and ammo products, they say about spraying it, but you can actually paint it on and then spray your base cover, your top color over the top, and then go at it that way. So you've got a lot more control.
I've had better results with hairspray. The chipping fluid, I cannot get it to work properly. It works, but it's not the way I want it. The hairspray works best for me.
What paint you use over the top, Ralph?
Tamiya.
Tamiya, okay. Just XF range.
Yep.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, it should work. I mean, you should get a reasonable result, because if you put a hard lacquer over the top of it, or even I mean, the lacquer won't work, but depending on the type of acrylic, some are softer than others. So Vallejo is very, very soft. So that tends to work very, very well if you want a heavily chipped effect, whereas Tamiya is a little bit harder. So you get less knackered effect, basically.
Well, let me see. Where's my cursor gone?
Oh, hang on. We'll share in a second. Let's
Okay.
make life a little easier for Brad. Okay. You can dig that picture up that you want to show, and we'll talk about it before the end if we want to. Let's just consider the poor person that's having to try and drive a computer in someone else that's not located where they are. Eduardo came and spoke to everybody earlier. Eduardo shared some of his work here. No doubt this has been on his YouTube channel. Prototype photograph at the top. Model at the bottom. I think
he's done a good job.
Good. That's amazing. Really, really good.
If I was going to be really, really picky, it's just kind of working it down into the kind of nooks and crannies.
Yeah.
Say down in the bottom right. But I'm being very, very picky though. So otherwise, good job.
It is a good job, and I can point out something here from a prototype. If you look at the prototype, where the S in service is, actually it's the R. From the R to the left is cleaner than from the R to the right, and there's a reason for that. There's an actual trough above the door rail that stops the water from coming down, and it comes down at the end of the trough, which is right where the R is. And it's the same on the other side. It goes just slightly past the door, so there's going to be clean spots. And it looks like he's got it a little bit cleaner in that where it says unit. I think that's what it says. But that's something a lot of guys miss. If you look at the prototype photograph, you'll see it every time. And the other thing I found for helping doing this stuff, everybody now carries a cell phone, a camera. Take a picture of your work as you go along and look at it. the camera doesn't lie. It'll show you what you missed because you're not seeing it with your eye completely.
I think the other thing to understand is that generally when you're viewing a model, you don't view it as closely as we view it when we're working on it. And so we're picking up a lot of these things, but if that car was in a train and it was going past us and we were standing 3 feet away from it or even on the other side of the room, some of these things you just simply would not be able to see.
Mhm.
So you've got to, depends what level you're doing and how many cars you've got, but it's kind of, I think going for the overall
So
consistency is good, Ralph,
so here's my take on running a train with weathered cars. Your locomotive and a couple of cars behind it are weathered, pretty good detail. Middle of the train, not so much. End of the train, weathered well again. Because when that train's going by, you see the locomotive and you see the end of it. You really don't see the middle, like you said.
Yeah, but that unweathered car in the middle is going to stand out a mile.
Not unweathered, just
No,
not
no,
weathered to the same degree.
no. I mean, if you had an unweathered car in the middle, it's going to stand
Oh,
out.
absolutely.
You've got to
I
go
just
all
came
in.
out of the paint shop. What do you want?
Yeah, well, I've seen things that have come straight out of the paint shop, but generally they sit outside the paint shop for a while waiting to be picked up and get filthy. And that's why when you see the heritage units, the UP heritage units and the CP heritage units, they're wrapped in plastic, not to hide the unit, although that's part of it, but it's mostly to make sure the thing doesn't get filthy between wherever it wherever it originates to and wherever they're going to take it to unveil it.
There's another reason for that too.
Hmm.
Inside of 2 days, your paint will fade because of the UV.
Hmm.
You cover it, it doesn't.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, as soon as something leaves the paint shop, it's getting weathered,
Yeah, it's not the same color 2 days later.
and that's not the paint shop facility. That's actually as soon as it goes back outside. So
It's the sun, Mother Nature playing games.
absolutely, especially in Canada, where it can weather one side of a locomotive and not the other, depending which way the loco's running. So, okay, there's Aaron's put in a caboose. I think it's a caboose that's now used as a shoving platform because it's got air horns on the roof and looks like the windows have been looks like they've
Blocked in.
and
Boarded up. Yep.
going over there, and there's a patch out. I see. He's patched. He's patched it.
Renumbered.
Yeah, you see on the back of the cupola. It's been. You can see that's cleaner than the surrounding area to make it look like that's been recently patched. Good. Very heavily weathered. It's your kind of heavy weather in here, Ralph.
No, that's too much for me. That's overdone. But he should have done the truck frames. He's done everything else so much. The truck frames are just still black.
Mm.
Oh, pardon me, the bearings are brown.
Mm. Yeah, but a good overall job there. Some good techniques, different things that you've done. Some good detail.
Yeah, it's a nice bit of modulation on the roof there in terms of different shades of rust.
Especially as this started as a blue box kit. So it's
Hey, there's nothing wrong with blue box kits.
there's
A little
not,
bit
but
of weathering, and they'll sit right beside the good kits.
yeah. I think Aaron's done a bit more than weathering there, so points for that. What else have we got? Come on. We have a view of a yard. This will be interesting because I see stuff that's not weathered in the background. So Robert Miller here has his first attempts with oil paints on some Frisco covered hoppers. Good streaks.
Yeah,
They're pretty
Yep.
straight.
yeah. I overall I like them. A
Yeah,
little bit
it's
more
good.
practice and it'll look even better than it looks now.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add on that is like the streaking's good, but say the end ladders, you'd again bit of sponge work on there along the rungs and stuff just to homogenize it a bit. But
Especially the middle one. The ladder doesn't look like it's done at all.
yeah, and maybe the M1, but again, it's a good start. Good start. Keep going.
Absolutely.
So roof walks and ladders. Roof walks on older cars, but ladders are places and platforms on cars are places where people walk. So would they be?
Absolutely.
I guess they're places where you would expect more chip paint and damage to the car.
Possibly, but you wouldn't have as much dirt and grime in those areas. You'd have the chip, but every time you grab the rung, you're taking grime off. So
yeah. Okay, cool. Well, that's all we have on Facebook, I think. Yep. So I will stop sharing. Ralph, did you have something you wanted to share with us?
yeah, we were talking about spotting and so on. Where are we? Share. Okay. Where did I get my cursor over there? There. Come on, open up. So this is done with some of the chipping is just done with a sponge and a paintbrush.
We're still only seeing that as a small image. Is that opened up behind? Oh no, there's another image you've got up behind. We're still only seeing your file storage there, Ralph.
Okay. Come on.
This is like radio with silence.
Yeah.
Whee!
Come on.
We'll see it now. There you go. See it. Santa Fe.
So this is done with a sponge and a paintbrush to get the rust chips and so on. I find that if you use chipping paints or anything like that, you can't do it on a pre-manufactured locomotive. It's already painted. So now, in order to weather it, you have to add to it. It's not like you're building it up from the original, like you're not adding the paint color, the Santa Fe and all that stuff. So all your rusting, which would normally be underneath the paint or coming from underneath, you have to put it on top and make it look like it's coming from underneath. So there's the chipping on the corners, on the edges. This here is done with a what do they call it? A closed cell foam, it's packing foam. It doesn't absorb water, but you can get paint on the surface of it, and you get those little granules of bubbles that make the marks. The white fade that's around here was done with a sponge and some Vallejo paints, and everything else was done with paintbrush and sponge to get that effect. So all the chipping up here was done with a toothpick, actually, where the paint is chipped off on the dynamic brake. I like to do, when I'm doing these things, I like to do a little bit of an oil spill on the tank. I put a glossy sort of dark paint on the wheel bearings.
So where you putting the glossy paint on the wheel bearings, is that to create oil and grease?
So it looks like oil and grease, yeah. So there's another, hang on. I think quite a few people have seen the one I did for Joe Fugate.
So Dan, what would you use to simulate oil and grease on bearings and stuff?
I tend to use the dedicated AK products. So they do a fuel stain and an oil stain. So if you're doing petrol tankers or oil tankers, you can thin the fuel stain stuff down and blow it through your airbrush to do staining, which comes out quite nice. You get that haze effect that you get off of spills from the top of filler tanks of fuel tankers or anything that's had oil in it. But that's good. Or say very thinned, gloss paint.
And that's pretty much what I use, the AK and the MIG ammo, the old spill and fuel.
But if you can't get those, thinned gloss paint was our tip.
Yeah, I mean, that going back in the day, that was the way most people did it. But the AK stuff is pretty readily available.
Rob,
I think.
Can you make those full screen?
Yes.
Just maximize them. Okay.
I can even blow it up some more.
That's a good idea because it's tiny. Cool.
So I don't know whether you can see that looks kind of shiny. Mm-hmm. That's the AK product. There's a little bit on the side of the coupler. The oil streaks have been put on and then sort of washed down so that they're not so bad. And this, I did this as an anniversary gift for Joe Fugate for his 25th anniversary for the Siskiyou line. And the wash that I put on, it's Tamiya paint mixed with alcohol. Okay. And it's roughly 10% white paint and 90% alcohol.
Wow. And
it's so thin to get that layer or that color of gray or fade, there's probably about 10 coats.
Yeah, so if you, sorry, Ralph, go on.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, if you read any of the AK literature, they talk about that as being a filter. So because it's so thin, but so effectively it's just a very, very thin wash.
Okay, well, Ralph, stop sharing. We're going to go to questions in the chat before we run out of time.
Okay.
Brad is going to be joining us. Hey, Brad, have we got quite a guest? There must be questions in the chat from that.
Yeah, correct. We've got quite a few questions there. One of the first ones that came up, what are some of the tips that you guys can recommend for beginners to remove unwanted weathering when starting out?
Remove unwanted weathering. I'm not sure.
I guess that depends. I guess it's going to start off with depending on what did you use.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it comes down to you have to be careful what you use because if you use alcohol, you can clean a lot of it off with alcohol. I say a lot of it. And when you get to the oil-based stuff, you have to use mineral spirits of some sort. If you use too much alcohol, you're also going to take the paint color of the car. And I don't know how far you want to go with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd try with mineral spirits to start with, and then airbrush cleaner or airbrush thinner, but nothing stronger than that because, as Ralph said, you'll just wind up stripping the thing.
Yeah,
you'll be back to bare plastic. So,
if you're going to be re-weathering it, then get off the best part you can or the best you can and add to it.
And I guess the key thing is if you've put a sealer on it, too late.
So, okay, talking about sealers, there's a trick to sealers too. And I learned this by mistake, and now I use it as a technique. If you use dull coat on your, so let's say it's a locomotive, and you have an area that you want to see a white streak, like calcium on a steam engine, calcium coming down from a valve. All you need is alcohol on a brush on the dull coat. Drag it down and the dull coat turns white. Don't seal it again with dull coat or it'll go back to its original color.
Okay.
Just something I found by accident.
A similar one to that is if you're after a very kind of sort of like chalky effect, if you really layer on matte varnish, that will go chalky, but it's a little bit random. So I wouldn't recommend it unless you want something absolutely bleached out to the nth degree. It's basically the stuff that it's what makes matte varnish matte varnish. It's the pigment inside it.
Okay. All right. We'll go into another question.
Okay, while we're on open-ended questions, but we'll try to target this. There's a question in there saying, what brand of airbrush do you recommend? But what we'll say is, what brand of airbrush do you both use?
Wait. No. The brand of airbrush that we recommend is that if you're an NMRA member, you go to the NMRA website and you go to you log in, you go to the members area, you go to our partnership program, and you go and look at US Airbrush and get yourself a massive discount for being an NMRA member.
Okay, that's not the
That's
airbrush. That's
official
the airbrush company. That's actually a distributor.
Yes, that's our recommendation.
So they sell Badger, and they sell Iwata, and they sell Grec. I think they sell Harder and Steenback as well. All good brushes, but you don't have to pay through the nose for an airbrush. If you wait for Badger just had a big sale where every airbrush they sell was $56 because it was 56 years of the company. I picked up 2 airbrushes. So I have two Badger Renegades. I have an Iwata. What's the other one? A Pash. And I also have a Badger 350, which I've had for 40 years, and it's my one that I use to put down lots of paint because it has the suction for the jars. All the rest are cup feed, gravity feed. So that 350 is the only single action. You push the button, you get air and paint.
Okay. We got to move on.
Okay.
Go if you want to know more about airbrushes. Sorry, Dan. If you want to know more about airbrushes, Dan did a great clinic on airbrushes this afternoon, and it'll be up on YouTube soon for you to see and watch again. Now you can rewind the stream, and you'll see it was at the beginning of this part of our stream today. Brad, we'll take one more question, then we're done.
Okay, I've got a few, so let me go through. We'll go on one that's more direct. Neil asked, if you have 2 collars, a light and a dark, which way is the best way to spray them on first? So light collar first, dark collar first.
Ralph, you go first. Wait, Ralph, then Dan.
Light then dark, but there you go.
I think so, yeah. I think so, but you have to be careful with your masking. If you're having one separated by the other, or you like the dark and the light, but you have to start with one of them. Usually you start with the lighter one because the lighter one takes more to cover the dark one.
Yep.
And Dan's top tip from his clinic earlier today was make sure you spray from the mask towards the module.
You spray across the mask, not to it.
Not towards the mask, away from the mask. Yeah.
Okay, I've got one other good question here that I'm going to ask that I see. Ralph, earlier on you mentioned 90% IP. Do you also recommend 70? Is that okay to use?
It is. It just means there's 30% more water in it. If you can't get the 90, then go ahead. I prefer the 90 because when I'm doing my weathering, I want to move quickly. And I know with the 90, it's going to dry quicker. That's all. And then I have to add this, dull coat. It comes in a 1 3/4 fluid ounce bottle. And I shoot this through my airbrush. I don't buy the rattle can, although I do have a rattle can just in case I run out. Mix it 50-50 with thinner and light coats between your layering. If you're going to use the AK products, then use an acrylic matte finish. but dull code is my final code.
Okay. Well, we'll leave it there for tonight. We could talk weathering and techniques. There's thousands of different techniques. There's loads and loads of different really good sites on YouTube. AK, we've talked a lot about AK. They're a European company. I think they're out of Spain.
Yep.
If you go and find their YouTube channel, there's tons of tips and techniques of how to use their different products, or just generally how to use acrylics or whatever, not necessarily their products. But that you can go and check out. But I think we'll have more weathering clinics from you guys in the future, hopefully. A few more techniques, maybe even some videos. But for now, we'll move on. We'll clear out the room and we will restart the stream as is our standard practice at 6 p.m. Eastern. So if you're in YouTube, you'll need to go back to NMRA.org and re-find the stream. If you're in Facebook, as long as you have followed the NMRA Facebook page, you'll get notification that the stream is restarted. And if not, you go to the NMRA Facebook group, and in a few minutes' time, I'll pin the new stream to the top of the group, so you'll be able to find it right at the top of the timeline in the NMRA Facebook group. But thank you guys for joining us. Thank you to all our clinicians today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening. If you're heading over to another place to watch a virtual national train show, please come back afterwards and follow with NMRX. If you're staying with us, thank you for staying with us. And our part 3 stream will be live shortly.